He commanded boardrooms that decided the fate of entire industries. His name, Julian Vance, was a whisper on the lips of world leaders and a thunderclap on the floors of every major stock exchange. His fortune could absorb the debt of a small nation, his penthouse was a silent glass kingdom in the clouds, and his schedule was a machine that left no room for error, and certainly no room for breath. But in the deafening silence after the trading day's frantic roar, in the vast empty museum he called home, Julian Vance was bankrupt of the one thing he couldn't acquire: happiness. His life was a string of cold transactions, and his heart was the most underperforming asset in his portfolio. He didn't just have everything, he was burdened by it. Every priceless artifact in his home was a monument to his isolation. Every fawning assistant was a reminder that real human connection was a currency he couldn't mint. He had a portfolio that could buy countries, but he couldn't buy a single genuine smile. Then, one stormy night on a deserted backroad, he took just to avoid the monotony of the highway, the world he so carefully controlled, simply broke. His brand-new six-figure electric sedan sputtered, whined, and died, leaving him stranded in a forgotten corner of the world, swallowed by a darkness that no amount of money could light up. Julian's day had started like any other, with the blue light of a dozen screens painting his face in the pre-dawn gloom. He drank a coffee he didn't taste, made by a chef he barely knew, before striding into a life made of numbers and projections. The trip was just business, a brutal but profitable move to acquire a struggling factory in some forgotten part of the state. It was a simple, clean kill. Fly in, sign the papers that would wreck a local economy, and fly out before the dust settled. He always took the back roads, not for the scenery, he never noticed it, but because it was faster, more efficient. It was a straight line, and Julian's life was built on straight lines. But nature, unlike the market, can't be predicted. The sky, a peaceful blue just an hour before, had turned a bruised, violent purple. Rain began to fall, not in sheets, but in solid waves that turned the road into a slick black mirror. He was annoyed, but not worried. His car was a fortress. Then came the sound, a sickening crunch from below, followed by a high-pitched electrical scream that cut through the storm's roar. The dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree in crisis, then went dark. The engine was silent. The only sound left was the howling wind and the drumming of rain on his carbon fiber roof. He swore, a rare crack in his icy calm. He reached for his phone. No signal, of course. He was in the middle of nowhere, a place that didn't exist on his digital maps. For the first time in 20 years, Julian Vance was not in control. He was just a man in an expensive suit, trapped inside a very expensive, very dead piece of metal. The frustration quickly curdled into a cold, unfamiliar feeling. It was a primal fear, the kind his wealth had long protected him from. He was alone, helpless, and the world he had so carefully built had just evaporated in a flash of lightning. After an hour of stubborn waiting, the cold started to seep into the cabin. He knew he couldn't stay there. Peering through the rain-streaked windshield, he saw it. A single, flickering point of light, maybe miles away. It was faint, a tiny star in an ocean of black, but it was a destination. It was hope. Gritting his teeth, Julian Vance, the man who moved markets, pushed open the heavy door of his car and stepped out into the storm. The mud instantly swallowed his $1,000 Italian leather shoe, but he barely noticed. He just started walking, one miserable soaked step at a time toward that lonely, distant light. That walk was a brutal lesson in humility. The wind tore at his suit, and the rain plastered his hair to his skull. Each step was a fight against the thick, grasping mud. By the time he limped into the small pool of light cast by a single, swaying street lamp, he was a ghost of his former self. The light belonged to what you might call a town. He was on a main street, a collection of tired-looking buildings with dark, empty windows. A faded sign on a boarded-up store read, Harmony Creek. The name felt like a cruel joke. The place felt like it was all out of harmony. The light he'd been chasing came from a small, simple house with a welcoming porch. A hand-painted sign, slightly crooked, read, Clara McCann, RN. With what little energy he had left, he dragged himself up the steps and knocked. The sound was swallowed by the storm. He knocked again, harder this time, a desperate, frantic rhythm. The door creaked open, and a woman stood there framed by the warm light from inside. She looked to be in her early 30s, with kind eyes that were now wide with alarm. This was Clara. She took in his wrecked appearance, the ruined suit, the mud caking his legs, the exhaustion on his face. For a moment she was cautious. Strangers were rare here, and a stranger appearing in the middle of a biblical storm felt like an omen. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice steady. "My car, it broke down," Julian managed, his own voice hoarse. "Out on the old county road. My phone has no service. Is there a garage? A hotel?" Clara gave a small, sad shake of her head. "The only hotel closed 5 years ago. And Joe's garage, well, Joe's visiting his grandkids' estate over, won't be back for a week." Julian's shoulders slumped. A week? In this place? The thought was unbearable. "A week? That's not possible. I need to get to the city. I have meetings." He reached for his wallet, a reflex born of a lifetime of solving problems with cash. "I'll pay you. Whatever you want. Just find me a car, a phone, anything." Clara looked at the wallet, then back at his face. She didn't see a powerful man. She saw a drenched, desperate person. Her professional shell as the town's only nurse melted away, replaced by the simple instinct to help. "You can't buy a miracle in this storm, mister," she said softly. "But you can come inside before you catch your death. Come on, get in here." She held the door open wider, an invitation that went against every cynical bone in Julian's body. He hesitated, then stumbled inside, bringing the storm and mud with him onto her clean floor. He expected a lecture, a sigh of annoyance. Instead, she just handed him a towel. "The guest room is up the stairs," she said, her tone matter-of-fact. "There are some of my late father's old clothes in the closet. They'll be big on you, but they're dry. There's soup on the stove if you're hungry." Julian was speechless. There was no negotiation, just pure, unprompted kindness. He mumbled a thank you and made his way upstairs. The room was simple, with a handmade quilt on the bed. As he changed out of his soaked, ruined suit and into a worn flannel shirt and old jeans, he felt a strange sense of dislocation. He was wearing another man's clothes, in a stranger's house, in a town that wasn't on any map he cared about. For the first time, he wasn't Julian Vance, the billionaire. He was just Julian, a man who was lost and who'd been offered shelter. It was a feeling so foreign, so unsettling, and yet so strangely warm. The next few days were a slow, painful detox from the life Julian knew. The storm passed, but his car remained a dead monument on the roadside, and the town's mechanic was still days away. Julian was trapped in Harmony Creek, a place where time seemed to crawl. His phone was a useless brick. The internet was a distant memory. His world of instant information and billion-dollar decisions had been replaced by the chirping of crickets and the slow crawl of the sun. He spent the first day pacing Clara's small house like a caged tiger, his mind racing with the deals he was missing. He tried to offer Clara money again, for her trouble, for the food, for the room. Each time, she politely refused. "Around here, we help each other because it's the right thing to do, not for a payout," she explained, her words a gentle challenge to his entire worldview. On the second day, desperate for something to do, he followed Clara to her office, the Harmony Creek Community Clinic. It was a small, tired building with peeling paint and old equipment. Yet, it was the heart of the town. Julian watched in stunned silence as Clara moved through her day. She wasn't just a nurse, she was a counselor, a friend, a lifeline. She treated an old farmer's arthritis, gave a flu shot to a little kid, and then spent an hour just talking to a lonely widow, holding her hand and listening. She did it all with a patience that Julian found both baffling and captivating. He learned that the clinic was always on the verge of closing, surviving on small grants and bake sales. The state was even threatening to cut its funding. That afternoon, he saw a group of townspeople trying to fix a rotting boardwalk on Main Street. They were clumsy, arguing and getting nowhere. On an impulse he didn't understand, Julian, who hadn't done a day of manual labor in his life, walked over. "You're not bracing it correctly," he said, his voice clipped and sure. They stared at him, the stranger in the borrowed clothes. Ignoring them, he picked up a hammer and showed them how to angle the supports, a piece of structural knowledge he'd picked up overseeing the construction of a skyscraper. They worked for hours, and by the end of it the boardwalk was steady. An old man clapped him on the shoulder. "Thanks, stranger," he said with a gap-toothed grin. "You're all right." That evening, sitting on Clara's porch, Julian felt a different kind of tired. It wasn't the weariness of mental combat. It was the satisfying ache of physical work, of creating something with his own hands. Clara brought out 2 glasses of iced tea. "You know," she said, a small smile on her lips, "I think that's the first time I've seen a real smile on your face since you got here." Julian was taken aback. He hadn't even realized it. He looked at his hands, now covered in small scratches and sawdust. He'd spent the day doing something that wouldn't earn him $1 or show up on any financial report. Yet, it felt more real, more valuable than any deal he had ever closed. He was starting to see the world not as a series of transactions, but as a web of connections. "Your clinic," he said, changing the subject. "It's in trouble." Clara's smile faded a little. "It always is, but we manage." "What if you didn't have to just manage?" he asked, the gears in his mind starting to turn in a completely new direction. He wasn't thinking about profit margins. He was thinking about the look on the old widow's face when Clara held her hand. The logic was the same: identify a problem, find a solution, but the goal was entirely different. As the days went on, Julian found himself woven into the fabric of Harmony Creek. He learned people's names. He helped repair the library roof. He ate simple home-cooked meals at Clara's table and found they tasted better than any Michelin-starred dish he'd ever had. He was being changed by the town and by the quiet kindness of the nurse who had offered him shelter, not just from a storm, but from the emptiness of his life. The day finally came when old Joe, the mechanic, returned. With surprising skill and a few well-placed whacks with a wrench, he got the engine of Julian's car running. The purr of the powerful motor was a familiar sound, a call back to the world waiting for him. His assistant had been frantic. His life was waiting to be snapped back into place. He stood by the car, keys in his hand. Clara stood on her porch, watching him, a quiet sadness in her eyes. This was it. The stranger would leave, and life would go on. Julian looked at the car, then back at the small town. He saw the peeling paint and the quiet desperation, but he also saw the resilience. He saw the people who had shared what little they had. He saw the children playing, and he saw Clara, the unwavering beacon of hope. Leaving now felt like a betrayal, like abandoning the only real thing he had found in years. He walked over to her, his decision made. "I'm not leaving," he said. Clara looked confused. "But your car, your meetings, your life—" "That wasn't a life," Julian said, the admission costing him more than any failed investment ever had. "It was an acquisition strategy. This is different." He finally told her who he was, not with arrogance, but with the humility of a man asking for help. He told her about his company, his resources, his ability to move mountains with a single phone call. And then he laid out his plan. It wasn't charity. It was an investment in hope. He wanted to partner with her, to use his knowledge and her compassion to rebuild Harmony Creek. The town's transformation was incredible. Julian didn't just write a check. He established a loan program for local entrepreneurs, and soon the boarded-up storefronts began to reopen. A bakery filled the morning air with the smell of fresh bread. He created the Harmony Creek Foundation, a permanent fund to ensure the clinic would never have to worry about money again. He funded scholarships for local students to enter the medical field. He bought the town's abandoned properties and turned them into beautiful, affordable housing for seniors and young families. His actions created a ripple effect. People had jobs, they had pride. The town that was once a symbol of decay began to attract new families. Harmony Creek was no longer a forgotten footnote on a map. It was becoming a beacon of what's possible when wealth is guided by wisdom and power is tempered by compassion. Months later, Julian stood with Clara on a hill overlooking the town. Main Street was bustling. The clinic had a new wing, and kids' laughter spilled out from a newly built park. Julian had traded his penthouse for a restored farmhouse and his suits for comfortable jeans. He still ran his empire, but he did it from a small office above the new bakery, his days punctuated by the friendly waves of his neighbors. He had poured millions into Harmony Creek, but what he got back was priceless. He'd found a purpose beyond profit. He'd found a community. He'd found a home. The emptiness that had haunted him in his glass tower was gone, replaced by a deep sense of fulfillment. He turned to Clara, who was smiling as she watched the town she loved thrive. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he was no longer afraid to show. "For what?" she asked. "You're the one who did all this." "You saved me, Clara," he said softly. "I was the one who was lost. You gave me shelter." She slipped her hand into his, her touch warm and real. The town below wasn't just a testament to his money, but a monument to her kindness. In a world that measures success in dollars, they had built something truly priceless. A community reborn from despair, a life rebuilt on connection, and a love story written in the heart of a small town that was forgotten no more. Oh, if this story of transformation resonated with you, please consider liking this video and sharing it with someone who might need a little hope today. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories about how one act of compassion can change everything. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What did this story mean to you?